They were told Americans would never trust them, never see them as anything more than the enemy. But when 3 German nurses stepped into that blood-soaked field hospital in Texas, August 1945, the chief surgeon did not hand them mops or bandages. He handed them scalpels. Not to clean wounds, but to lead the surgery. On an American soldier. With American doctors watching. They expected humiliation and shame. Instead, they were given the one thing more dangerous than hatred: professional respect. If this story moves you, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. These forgotten moments of history deserve to be remembered. The August heat in Central Texas was like nothing Greta Weber had experienced in her 28 years. It pressed down from a white sky, making the air shimmer above the dusty road. The bus carrying her and 15 other German prisoners rattled along Highway 81, passing through small towns where American flags hung motionless in the still air. Farm fields stretched endlessly, golden wheat ready for harvest. Children played in front yards. Women pushed baby carriages down tree-lined streets. Everything looked so peaceful, so untouched by war. Greta pressed her face close to the window, her breath fogging the glass. Behind her, Elsa Hoffman adjusted the collar of her prison-issue dress, fingers trembling. They had been nurses in the Wehrmacht medical corps, not soldiers, but healers. Yet here they were, classified as prisoners of war, being transported to a camp somewhere in the heart of America. The bus turned off the main road, dust clouds rising behind its wheels. A sign appeared, Camp Swift, U.S. Army Training Facility. Guard towers came into view first, then rows of white wooden buildings arranged in perfect military order. The camp was massive, housing thousands of prisoners, most of them German soldiers captured in North Africa or Europe. But there was a separate section for the women, for nurses and auxiliaries, who had served the Wehrmacht in various capacities. The bus stopped at the gates. American soldiers in summer uniforms approached, rifles slung casually over their shoulders. They looked so young, Greta thought. Boys, really. One of them opened the bus door. The heat flooded in, thick and suffocating. The smell hit first, not the expected stench of overcrowded camps or unwashed bodies, but something else entirely. Pine disinfectant, fresh paint, and underneath it all, the earthy smell of Texas soil baking under an unforgiving sun. As Greta stepped off the bus, her legs weak from days of travel, she heard sounds that confused her. Laughter, music drifting from somewhere inside the camp, the crack of a baseball bat hitting a ball. An American sergeant checked their papers, his face neutral but not hostile. He spoke slowly as if they might not understand. Some of the women did not. Greta did. She had studied English before the war, had dreamed once of traveling to America as a tourist, not a prisoner. They were led through the gates into a world that defied everything they had been told. The barracks were clean, painted white with screened windows. Beds had real mattresses. There was a recreation hall, a library, even a small garden where prisoners grew vegetables. This was not the brutal imprisonment they had been warned about during their final days in Germany. This was something else, something that made Greta feel more confused than relieved. Elsa stood beside Greta, her eyes wide and frightened. She had been a surgical nurse at a field hospital near Berlin. She had seen things no person should see, had worked 18-hour shifts as wounded soldiers poured in from the Eastern Front. She had expected American captivity to be punishment for Germany's sins. She had expected suffering. Instead, she saw women playing cards on a barrack porch, prisoners speaking to guards without fear. The contradiction made her head spin. One woman whispered to Greta in German, her voice shaking. "This is a trick. It must be. They want us to trust them before they turn cruel." Greta did not reply. She did not know what to think. The third nurse in their group, Margarete Klein, said nothing at all. She had not spoken since they left the ship in New Orleans 3 days ago. She simply followed, her face empty, her hands clutching a small leather medical bag she had somehow managed to keep through the entire journey from Germany. They were assigned to Barrack 7, given clean uniforms, shown the washing facilities, the mess hall, the medical clinic. Everything was explained in simple English by a female officer who smiled too much. Greta found the smiling unsettling. In Germany, officers did not smile. They commanded. They punished. They maintained discipline through fear. That first night, lying on a real bed with clean sheets, Greta wrote in a small notebook she had carried from Germany. The words came slowly, her English rusty. "They treat us like human beings. Why? We are the enemy. We should be suffering. But here I am more comfortable than I was in Berlin the last 2 years of the war. What does this mean? What do they want from us?" 3 days into their time at Camp Swift, Greta and the other nurses were called to the camp administration building. They went with hearts pounding, expecting the worst. Perhaps the kindness had been temporary. Perhaps now came the real punishment. Captain James Harrison sat behind a desk covered with files. He was in his 40s, gray at the temples, with the tired eyes of someone who had seen too much war. An interpreter stood beside him, though Greta quickly indicated she could understand English well enough. Captain Harrison opened 3 folders. He looked at each woman in turn. "Miss Weber, you trained at the Berlin Charité Hospital before the war. Surgical nursing, specializing in trauma care. Is that correct? Greta nodded slowly, surprised he knew this. He turned to Elsa. Miss Hoffman, you worked in a Wehrmacht field hospital for 3 years. You assisted in over 200 battlefield surgeries. Elsa's face went pale. Yes, she whispered. Then to Margarete, who still had not spoken. Miss Klein, your file indicates you were one of the best surgical nurses in Hamburg before the war. You trained other nurses. You pioneered new techniques for treating severe burns. Margarete lifted her eyes for the first time in days. A single tear ran down her cheek. She nodded. Captain Harrison closed the folders. He stood up and walked around the desk, leaning against its edge in a casual way that made the women even more nervous. Ladies, I am going to be direct with you. This camp has a field hospital. We treat injured soldiers from the training exercises here. Most injuries are minor, broken bones, lacerations, heat stroke, but occasionally we get serious cases. Soldiers from the Pacific Theater who are sent here for recovery, complications from old wounds, infections, sometimes surgical emergencies. He paused, letting his words sink in. We are short-staffed. The war in the Pacific is still going on. Most of our experienced medical personnel are overseas. What we have here are young medics, fresh out of training, and a few doctors who are near retirement age. Good people, but not enough of them, not with the right experience. Greta felt her throat tighten. She knew where this was going, but it seemed impossible. Captain Harrison continued. I am authorized by the camp commander to ask if you would be willing to work in our field hospital, under supervision at first, assisting with basic care. If you prove capable, and if you are willing, you would have the opportunity to use your full training. The silence in the room was absolute. Greta could hear her own heartbeat. Beside her, Elsa had gone completely still. Margarete stared at the captain as if he had spoken in a foreign language. You want us, Greta said slowly, making sure she understood correctly, to care for American soldiers? Yes. We are prisoners. Yes. We are German. Captain Harrison met her eyes. You are also nurses, and right now, we need nurses more than we need to hold grudges. The Geneva Convention requires that we allow prisoners to work in areas matching their skills, if they volunteer. We cannot force you, but I am asking. Elsa found her voice trembling. Your soldiers would never accept this. They would refuse treatment from Germans. Some might, the captain admitted, but when a man is bleeding, when he is in pain, he does not care who stops the bleeding or eases the pain. He cares that someone does. They walked back to their barrack in stunned silence. Other prisoners stared at them, sensing something had changed. That night, the 3 nurses sat on Greta's bunk and spoke in hushed German, their words tumbling over each other. It is a test, Elsa said. They want to see if we will fail so they can punish us. Or they truly need help, Greta replied. The captain did not look like he was lying. Margarete finally spoke, her first words in days. I became a nurse to heal people. Not German people, not American people, just people. If they will let me heal again, I will do it. All 3 of them volunteered. 2 days later, they reported to the camp field hospital at 7 in the morning. The building was a converted barracks larger than the others with a red cross painted on its roof. Inside, it was clean but clearly strained. Young medics rushed between beds. An older doctor barked orders. Patients moaned or slept or stared at the ceiling. A nurse, maybe 22 years old, with red hair pulled back severely, showed them around. Her name was Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, and her face showed no warmth. You will start with basic care, she said curtly. Changing bandages, taking temperatures, feeding patients who cannot feed themselves. You will not administer medications. You will not make any medical decisions. You will not speak to patients unless absolutely necessary. Is that clear? Yes, Greta replied for all of them. Good. And one more thing. Lieutenant Mitchell stepped closer, her voice dropping. I do not trust you. I do not like this arrangement. If you make one mistake, if you give me any reason to doubt you, I will have you removed immediately. These are our boys. They fought your country. Some of their friends died fighting Germans. So you will do your work, and you will do it perfectly, and you will remember every moment that you are here on borrowed trust. The first few days were exactly as difficult as Lieutenant Mitchell had promised. The German nurses worked silently, carefully, aware of every eye on them. Some soldiers refused their care. One young man, his leg in a cast, turned his face to the wall when Greta approached to change his water pitcher. I do not want her near me, he told Lieutenant Mitchell. My brother died at Normandy. Lieutenant Mitchell moved Greta to a different patient without comment, but other soldiers did not seem to care. Or perhaps they were too sick to care. Greta changed bandages on a burn victim who never opened his eyes. She helped feed a soldier with a broken jaw who nodded his thanks. She took vital signs, emptied bedpans, mopped floors, did all the unglamorous work that kept a hospital functioning, and she watched. She watched the American medics work. Some were skilled, many were not. They lacked the efficiency that came from experience, the calm in crisis that Greta had developed during 3 years of wartime nursing. She saw procedures done incorrectly, supplies wasted, opportunities missed to catch complications early. She said nothing. She was a prisoner. She was German. She was there on borrowed trust. It happened on their 7th day at the hospital. A training exercise had gone wrong. A truck overturned. Multiple casualties were coming in. The hospital erupted into controlled chaos. The chief surgeon, Dr. Raymond Cole, began barking orders. Medics scrambled. Lieutenant Mitchell's face went tight with stress. The first soldier came through the doors on a stretcher. Greta caught a glimpse as they rushed him past. Severe abdominal trauma. Possible internal bleeding. She knew that look. She had seen it dozens of times in Germany. More stretchers came. Dr. Cole was triaging, deciding who needed surgery immediately and who could wait. His hands moved quickly, but Greta could see he was overwhelmed. There were only 2 doctors in the hospital that day. The other was elderly Dr. Phillips, whose hands shook with early Parkinson's disease. "Mitchell," Dr. Cole shouted. "Prep the surgery room. I need to operate now. This boy has maybe 20 minutes." Lieutenant Mitchell ran. Greta watched her go, saw her hands shaking as she fumbled with the surgery room door. The lieutenant was a good nurse, but she was young, inexperienced with battlefield trauma. This was not a routine surgery. This was a life-or-death race against time. Greta looked at Elsa. Elsa looked back. They both knew what was about to happen. They had seen it too many times in Germany. A surgeon working too fast under pressure. A nurse who could not anticipate his needs, mistakes, death. Dr. Cole was scrubbing in. He looked exhausted. Greta did not know how long he had been working that day, but she could see the fatigue in his shoulders. This was not his fault. There simply were not enough experienced people. Then Dr. Cole turned and saw Greta and Elsa standing there. He paused, water running over his hands. He looked at them for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice cutting through the chaos. "You, Weber, your file says you have surgical experience." "Yes, doctor." "How much?" 3 years, field hospital, Berlin. Before that, 2 years at Charité." He nodded once. "Scrub in. You are assisting." Lieutenant Mitchell appeared at the surgery room door. "Dr. Cole, you cannot be serious. She is a prisoner. She is German. We cannot—" "That boy on the table is going to die if I do not have experienced help," Dr. Cole said, his voice sharp. "Right now I need a surgical nurse who knows what she is doing, not a debate about politics. Mitchell, you will assist Weber. Learn from her. Weber, get in here. Now!" Greta's hands trembled as she scrubbed. This was not what she had expected. This was not what anyone had expected. She was about to walk into an American surgery room, about to help save an American soldier's life, about to use skills she had learned while serving an army that America had fought against. The contradiction was dizzying, but her training took over. She had been a nurse for 7 years. She had been a good nurse. Her hands steadied. She walked into the surgery room. The young soldier on the table was maybe 19. His face was the color of ash. Dr. Cole worked quickly, opening the abdomen, searching for the source of bleeding. Greta stood beside him, instruments ready before he asked for them. Clamp, suction, retractor. Her hands moved with the muscle memory of hundreds of surgeries. "Bleeder," Dr. Cole said. "Left side." Greta saw it before he finished speaking. She had the right clamp in his hand instantly. He glanced at her, surprised, then nodded. They worked in silence, a rhythm developing. Dr. Cole was good, better than some surgeons Greta had worked with in Germany. He was steady, precise, and he did not waste time with unnecessary talk. Across the table, Lieutenant Mitchell watched with wide eyes. She was supposed to be assisting, but she was frozen. She had never seen trauma surgery like this. She did not know what to do. "Mitchell," Greta said quietly, "monitor his blood pressure. Call out if it drops below 80. The lieutenant blinked, then moved to follow the instruction. She looked grateful to have something specific to do. 20 minutes later, the bleeding was controlled. The soldier's vital signs stabilized. Dr. Cole began closing. His shoulders relaxed slightly. "Good work," he said, not looking up from his sutures. "You have steady hands, Weber." "Thank you, doctor." When they finished, when the soldier was transferred to recovery, Dr. Cole pulled off his surgical mask and looked at Greta directly. "That was the cleanest assist I have had in 6 months. Where did you train?" She told him. "Berlin Charité, the Wehrmacht Medical Corps. 3 years of battlefield trauma." He listened, his expression thoughtful. "We are going to have a conversation with Captain Harrison," he said finally. "I need you in this hospital. Officially." Within 3 days, the arrangement was formalized. Greta, Elsa, and Margarete would work full-time in the hospital. They would assist in surgeries. They would train the younger medics. They would be supervised, but trusted. The news spread through the camp like wildfire. Some prisoners were proud. German nurses showing American doctors what real skill looked like. Others were ashamed. How could they help the enemy? Some American soldiers in the hospital were angry. One sergeant filed a formal complaint. But Captain Harrison stood firm. The camp needed experienced medical staff. The Geneva Convention allowed it. The arrangement would continue. Greta found herself working 12-hour shifts. She woke before dawn, walked to the hospital, and did not leave until after dark. The work was exhausting and familiar. She changed dressings, monitored vital signs, assisted in surgeries, taught young medics how to properly insert an IV or read the signs of infection. And slowly something strange happened. The American medical staff began to trust her. Dr. Cole requested her specifically for complex surgeries. Lieutenant Mitchell, after her initial hostility, started asking Greta questions, learning from her. The young medics watched how Greta worked and copied her techniques. Even some of the patients warmed to her. The soldier whose leg was in a cast, the one who had refused her care that first week, called her over one day. "Nurse Weber," he said quietly. "I was wrong. Thank you for taking care of the others. I'm sorry I was rude." Greta did not know what to say. She simply nodded and moved on to the next patient. The weeks turned into months. August became September, then October. The Texas heat finally broke. Autumn came, though it was nothing like autumn in Germany. The trees here did not turn the same brilliant reds and golds. Everything was subtler, browns and yellows fading into winter. Greta found herself thinking often about the seasons, about how even nature worked differently in this country. Everything was different here, even the most basic things. In the hospital, a rhythm developed. Morning rounds started at 7. Greta would move from bed to bed, checking vital signs, changing dressings, making notes on charts. She learned the names of every patient, their stories, where they came from. Private Johnson from Iowa, a farm boy who missed his cattle. Corporal Martinez from New Mexico, who taught her Spanish words during his recovery. Sergeant Williams from Georgia, who had 3 children and showed her their photographs every single day. These were not faceless enemies. They were boys, young men, some barely 20. They missed their mothers. They worried about sweethearts back home. They laughed at stupid jokes and cried when they were in pain. They were, Greta realized with a jolt one day, exactly like the German soldiers she had treated in Berlin. The uniforms were different, the language was different, but the humanity underneath was identical. She started teaching informal classes for the younger medics during lunch breaks, how to properly clean a surgical wound, how to recognize the early signs of infection, how to keep a patient calm during painful procedures. The medics listened eagerly, taking notes, asking questions. One young medic, barely 19, told her, "You explain things better than our instructors did in training. You make it make sense." Lieutenant Mitchell, who had been so hostile at first, became something close to a friend. They would sometimes have coffee together after difficult shifts, sitting in the small break room, too tired to talk much but comfortable in the silence. One evening, Mitchell said quietly, "I was wrong about you. I thought because you were German, you would not care about our boys. But you care more than some of our own nurses. You really see them as patients, not as the enemy." Greta replied, "I learned early that a patient is a patient. Nationality is something politicians care about. When you are holding someone's hand while they die, you do not think about flags. You think about the person." Greta fell into a routine. Wake at 6, breakfast in the mess hall, walk to the hospital, work until evening, return to the barrack. Write letters home that took months to arrive, if they arrived at all. Read books from the camp library. Sleep. Elsa worked in the recovery ward, caring for soldiers who were healing from surgery or illness. She had a gentle touch and infinite patience. Soldiers called her Nurse Elsa with affection. Some told her about their families back home, showed her photographs of wives and children. She listened and smiled and never mentioned that her own family in Berlin might be dead. She did not know. The letters had stopped coming months ago. Margarete worked in the burn unit. It was the hardest assignment, the one no one wanted. Burns were painful, slow to heal, often fatal. But Margarete had pioneered burn treatment techniques in Hamburg. She knew how to manage pain, how to prevent infection, how to give hope to men who looked in mirrors and saw monsters. One young soldier, Private Danny Chen, had been burned in a training accident. Gasoline fire. His face and hands were scarred terribly. He refused to let anyone see him at first, keeping a sheet over his head. But Margarete sat beside his bed every day and talked to him. She told him about patients she had treated in Germany. She told him burns healed. She told him he was still alive, and that was what mattered. Slowly, Private Chen began to talk back. Then he lowered the sheet. Then he looked in a mirror. It was a small victory, but it felt enormous. But with every small victory, the contradiction grew heavier. Greta saved American lives while German cities burned. She ate 3 meals a day while her sister in Munich wrote about hunger. She slept in a clean bed while refugees wandered the roads of Germany with nowhere to go. The guilt was a constant weight. Sometimes at night, Greta lay awake and thought about the soldiers she had helped in Germany. Young men who had died despite her best efforts. Young men who had believed they were fighting for something noble and had died in mud and blood and confusion. And now she was healing the soldiers who had defeated them. What did that make her? A traitor? A survivor? Just a nurse doing what nurses do? she wrote in her notebook late one October night. I do not know who I am anymore. I am German, but I heal Americans. I am a prisoner, but I am trusted with lives. I am the enemy, but soldiers thank me. The Americans treat me with more respect than my own officers did in Berlin. How can I make sense of this? The irony was unbearable. In Germany, she had been just another nurse, overworked and underfed, treated as disposable. Here, as a prisoner, she was valued. Dr. Cole consulted her on difficult cases. Lieutenant Mitchell called her one of the best surgical nurses I have worked with. Medics competed to be assigned to surgeries when Greta was assisting because they knew they would learn something. The enemy respected her skills more than her own nation ever had. It happened in November. A cold front had moved through Texas, bringing rain and wind. The hospital was busy with cases of pneumonia and influenza. Greta was in the middle of a routine examination when Captain Harrison appeared at the hospital door with Dr. Cole. They called Greta, Elsa, and Margarete into Dr. Cole's small office. The three nurses stood nervously, wondering if the arrangement was ending. Perhaps complaints had finally reached high enough. Perhaps they were being sent back to regular prisoner duties. Captain Harrison spoke first. Ladies, I want to inform you that Dr. Cole has submitted a formal recommendation. He has requested that you be given full nursing privileges within this hospital, equivalent to our American nurses. This would include administering medications, making care decisions, and, for Miss Weber specifically, leading surgical procedures under doctor supervision. Greta felt the floor shift beneath her. Leading surgeries? Her? Dr. Cole continued. I have worked with military nurses across 3 continents. The 3 of you are among the best I have seen. Your skills are wasted on basic care. We need you operating at your full capacity, if you are willing. Elsa found her voice. You trust us this much? I trust competence, Dr. Cole said simply. And you are competent. Very competent. Margaret spoke, her voice thick with emotion. In Hamburg, I was told I was useful only as long as I served the Reich. When the war went badly, when supplies ran low, we were blamed. We were called failures. Now you, our enemy, tell us we are valuable. How can this be? Captain Harrison's expression softened. Miss Klein, you are valuable because you save lives. That has nothing to do with what flag you served under. That is just humanity. 2 days later, Greta led her first surgery. An appendectomy, straightforward but necessary. Dr. Cole was present but stayed back, letting Greta work. She made the incision, removed the inflamed appendix, closed cleanly. It took 40 minutes. The patient was a corporal from Kansas, 23 years old, who had been complaining of abdominal pain for 2 days. When it was done, Dr. Cole nodded. Perfect. You could teach at a medical school, Weber. But it was what happened after that shook Greta most. The corporal woke in recovery. He was groggy, in pain, but alive. Lieutenant Mitchell told him, as protocol required, that a German nurse had performed his surgery. The corporal was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I want to thank her. Lieutenant Mitchell brought Greta to his bedside. The young man looked up at her, pale and exhausted. They told me you are German, a prisoner. Yes, Greta said. That is strange, he said, his voice weak. I fought against Germany. My unit landed at Normandy. We fought through France. I saw things, terrible things. I learned to hate, and now a German nurse saves my life. I do not know what to think about that. Greta did not know what to say. She had no words for the complexity of what they were both feeling. The corporal continued, But I am alive, so thank you. Whatever else is true, thank you. Greta nodded and walked away quickly, her eyes burning with tears she would not let fall. The 3 nurses talked long into the night in their barrack. The conversation ranged wildly, from guilt to gratitude, from shame to pride, from confusion to something close to understanding. Other prisoners in nearby bunks listened, some joining in quietly, others pretending to sleep while they absorbed every word. We are helping the enemy, Elsa said. That makes us traitors. My father fought in the Great War. He would be ashamed of me. Or it makes us nurses, Margarete countered. Nurses do not choose sides. We heal whoever needs healing. That was the Hippocratic tradition long before there were nations and flags. But these men fought our country, Elsa insisted. Some of them killed German soldiers. Maybe soldiers we knew. Maybe men we treated and failed to save. How can we heal the people who killed them? And we treated German soldiers who killed Americans, Greta said quietly. War makes everyone complicit. Every soldier on every side has blood on his hands, even if he never wanted it there. But healing is different. Healing is choosing to see the person, not the uniform. It is choosing to value life over victory. A woman from another bunk spoke up, her voice bitter. Easy for you to say. You work in the hospital. You are valued. The rest of us just clean and sort laundry. We are still prisoners, just prisoners with slightly nicer cells. Greta turned to face her. You are right. I am fortunate. But I am also still a prisoner. I wear the same uniform as you. I sleep in the same barrack. The only difference is that they need my skills more urgently than they need yours. That does not make me better. It makes me useful, and being useful is better than being forgotten. Do you think our families would understand? Elsa asked, bringing the conversation back. If they knew we were healing Americans while Germany suffers? While children starve in Berlin and Hamburg? Margarete spoke, her voice heavy with pain. My family is gone. My brother died in Russia, my sister in the bombing of Hamburg. My parents died in the winter of 1944, cold and hungry. So there is no one left to judge me. I heal Americans because there is no one else to heal. If I could go back and heal Germans, I would. But I cannot. This is what I have. This is where I am. I will not apologize for saving lives. The barrack was silent after that. What could anyone say to such loss? What words could answer that kind of grief? None of them had an answer. Greta wrote in her notebook that night, I think I finally understand something. The Americans do not respect us because we are German or despite being German. They respect us because we are good at what we do. They judge us by our skill, not our nationality. In Germany, it was always about loyalty first, competence second. Here it is the opposite. A wounded man does not care about the politics of the person who saves his life. He only cares that his life is saved. Maybe that is the truest thing about humanity. Maybe that is what war tries to destroy and what healing tries to restore. December came. The hospital decorated for Christmas. Someone put up a tree in the corner of the main ward. Soldiers who could walk helped hang ornaments. It was strange to see Christmas decorations in Texas, where there was no snow, where the temperature was still mild enough that the windows stayed open. One afternoon, Dr. Cole called Greta into his office. He closed the door and sat down, gesturing for her to sit as well. I received a letter from the camp commander, he said. He wanted to inform me that there have been complaints. Some soldiers' families have written letters questioning why German prisoners are allowed to care for American troops. One congressman has asked for an investigation. Greta's heart sank. This was the end. She had known it would come eventually. Dr. Cole continued. I wrote a response. I listed every surgery you have assisted in or led. I listed the survival rates before and after you joined our staff. I included testimonials from patients, including several who specifically requested German nurses for their care. I noted that you have trained our medics in techniques that have measurably improved our treatment outcomes. He paused, looking at her directly. The camp commander forwarded my response to the congressman with his own endorsement. He said, and I quote, These nurses represent the best of medical professionalism. They are assets to this facility, and their presence has saved American lives. I will not remove them based on prejudice when the evidence clearly shows their value. Greta felt tears welling up. She fought them back. I am telling you this, Dr. Cole said, because I want you to understand something. You have earned this, not as a prisoner being given a privilege, not as a German being tolerated, but as a professional who excels at her work. That is how we see you now. That is how the patients see you. And that is how it should be. He stood up, signaling the meeting was over. Merry Christmas, Nurse Weber. I am glad you are here. Greta walked back to the ward in a daze. She had been a nurse for 8 years. She had worked in prestigious hospitals, in desperate field conditions, in the chaos of war. But no one had ever told her, so plainly and honestly, that she was valued not for who she served, but for what she could do. The enemy had given her something her own country never had. Professional respect without conditions. January 1946 brought the news everyone had been waiting for. The war in the Pacific was over. Japan had surrendered months ago, but the bureaucracy of war moved slowly. Now finally, prisoner repatriation was beginning. German POWs would be sent home. Lists were posted. Names were called. Barracks that had been full began to empty. Men who had spent years in captivity packed their few belongings and boarded buses to ports where ships waited. They were going home. To devastated cities, to uncertain futures, but home. Greta's name was on the third list. She would leave in 2 weeks. She should have been relieved. She should have been happy. She was going home. Back to Germany. Back to whatever remained of Munich. Maybe her sister was still alive. Maybe there was something to rebuild. But she felt only dread. Elsa and Margarete felt the same. The three of them sat in their barrack one evening, the list of names still in Elsa's hand. I do not want to go, Elsa said, her voice barely a whisper. How can I say that? How can I not want to go home? Because here we are nurses, Margarete said. Here we matter. Here we save lives and people thank us. What will we be in Germany? Defeated, suspected, associated with a regime that brought ruin. We will be nurses who served the Wehrmacht. That will follow us forever. But our families, Elsa protested. They need us. Do they? Greta asked quietly. Or do they need food, shelter, safety, things we cannot provide? We will return to nothing. To hunger and cold and blame. Here we have purpose. The words hung in the air, impossible and true. 3 days before she was scheduled to leave, Greta was called for an emergency surgery. A training accident, severe. A young lieutenant with massive internal injuries. Dr. Cole was off-site at a conference. The only surgeon available was elderly Dr. Phillips, and his hands were too unsteady for this kind of work. Lieutenant Mitchell found Greta in the supply room. Dr. Phillips wants you to lead the surgery. He will supervise, but he says you need to operate. There is no one else qualified. Greta felt panic rise. Lead the surgery alone, without Dr. Cole present? This was beyond what she had done before. This was full responsibility. If the patient died, it would be her fault. Her decision. Her hands. I cannot, she said. I am not a surgeon. I am a nurse. I should not. He will die if you do not, Lieutenant Mitchell said flatly. Dr. Phillips cannot do this surgery. His hands shake. You can do this. I have watched you. You are the best surgical nurse in this hospital. You can do this. Greta scrubbed in with hands that would not stop shaking. The young lieutenant on the table was unconscious, his face pale, his vital signs dropping. Dr. Phillips stood beside her, but she could see the tremor in his hands. He could not do this. She had to. She made the first incision. Her hands steadied. Training took over. She had done this before. Not as the lead, but she had seen it done hundreds of times. She knew what to do. The surgery lasted 3 hours. It was complicated, delicate, requiring every bit of skill she had learned over 8 years of nursing. The young lieutenant had multiple injuries: ruptured spleen, torn liver, internal bleeding from 3 different sources. Each problem had to be addressed in sequence, carefully, precisely. One mistake would kill him. Dr. Phillips gave advice, but mostly he watched, his trembling hands folded behind his back. Clamp the splenic artery, he said at one point. Good, now ligate it. 2 sutures. Perfect. The medics in the room watched in awe. They had never seen someone work with such confidence, such precision. Every movement was economical. No wasted motion, no hesitation. Greta had done this before hundreds of times in worse conditions than this. Berlin field hospitals with bombs falling outside, operating by candlelight when the electricity failed, working on soldiers who screamed because there was no morphine left. This was clean, well lit, with proper instruments and adequate supplies. This was easy compared to what she had survived. Lieutenant Mitchell assisted, following Greta's instructions without question, learning with every passing minute. Suction here, Greta said. Now retract. Hold steady. Watch the blood pressure. Call out any changes. An hour into the surgery, one of the medics whispered to another, She is better than Dr. Cole. Watch her hands. She knows exactly what she is doing. 2 hours in, Greta found the third bleeder, the one she had been worried about, the one hidden behind the liver. She clamped it, tied it off, checked her work twice. The bleeding stopped. The young lieutenant's vital signs began to improve. Color returned to his face. He is going to make it, Dr. Phillips said, relief evident in his voice. You saved him, Nurse Weber. He was as close to death as a man can be, and you brought him back. And when it was done, when the young lieutenant's vital signs stabilized, when Dr. Phillips said, Well done, Nurse Weber, very well done, Greta felt something crack open inside her chest. She had just saved an American officer's life. She, a German prisoner of war, the enemy, and they had trusted her to do it. They had given her the scalpel and said, lead this surgery, and trusted that she would do her best. What did that mean? What did any of this mean? That night, Greta sat in the empty hospital chapel. She was not religious, had not been to church since before the war, but she needed a quiet place to think. The chapel was small, just a few rows of chairs and a simple cross on the wall. She thought about the young lieutenant she had saved. She thought about all the soldiers she had cared for over these months. American boys, most of them, farm kids and city boys who had been drafted and trained and sent to war. They were not so different from the German soldiers she had treated in Berlin. They bled the same way. They cried for their mothers the same way. They died the same way. The war had taught her to see them as enemies, but nursing had taught her to see them as patients, as people. And in the end, that was stronger than nationalism or propaganda or hate. She pulled out her notebook and wrote by the dim chapel light, Today I saved a life, an American life, and I do not feel like a traitor. I feel like a nurse. Maybe that is the only identity that matters. Not German or American. Not captor or captive. Just healer and patient. Just human and human. The war tried to make us forget that. But in this hospital, in these surgeries, I remember. She paused, pen hovering over paper. Then she wrote the truth she had been avoiding. I do not want to leave. I do not want to go back to Germany. Here I am valued for what I can do, not punished for where I come from. Here I save lives and am thanked for it. Here I am a nurse, and that is enough. That is everything. Captain Harrison called the 3 nurses to his office 2 days before their scheduled departure. Dr. Cole was there as well, and the camp commander, Colonel Roberts, whom Greta had never met personally. Colonel Roberts spoke first. Ladies, I understand you are scheduled for repatriation. However, Dr. Cole has made an unusual request. He has asked if you might be willing to delay your departure, to stay and continue working at the hospital. The three nurses exchanged glances. Dr. Cole continued. The war is over, but we still have patients who need care. We are rebuilding our medical staff, but it takes time. You three have become essential to this hospital's operation. I would like you to stay, not as prisoners, as staff. Staff? Elsa asked, confused. We can arrange work visas, Colonel Roberts said. You would be employed by the U.S. Army as civilian medical personnel. You would be paid, you would have housing, and when you do eventually return to Germany, you would go as skilled professionals with sterling references, not as defeated prisoners. Margarete spoke, her voice thick with emotion. You want us to stay? Voluntarily? Yes, Dr. Cole said simply. I want you to stay because you are excellent nurses, and we need excellent nurses. It is that simple. Greta felt tears slip down her cheeks. She did not bother to wipe them away. In Germany, I was told I was useful only while I served the Reich. When the war went bad, we were blamed for failures. We were disposable. Now you tell us we are valuable. You want us to stay. This is hard to believe. Captain Harrison leaned forward. Miss Weber, you performed solo surgery 3 days ago and saved Lieutenant Morrison's life. He is awake now. He asked to meet you. He wants to thank the woman who gave him a future. That is your value. Not what country you come from, not what army you served, just what you can do and how well you do it. They were given 3 days to decide. 3 days to choose between returning to a broken homeland and staying in the country that had been their enemy. 3 days to weigh family against profession, loyalty against opportunity, guilt against gratitude. The three nurses talked endlessly. They wrote letters home, though they knew the letters might never arrive, might never reach the people they were meant for. They walked the campgrounds at all hours, sometimes together, sometimes alone, trying to imagine staying here permanently, trying to imagine what that would mean for the rest of their lives. Greta wrote a letter to her sister that she rewrote 5 times, each version different, each trying to explain the unexplainable. How could she tell her sister that she did not want to come home? How could she explain that in captivity she had found more freedom than she had ever known in Germany? That the enemy respected her more than her own nation ever had? The words sounded like betrayal no matter how she phrased them. She walked to the hospital one evening, even though she was not scheduled to work. She found Dr. Cole in his office, doing paperwork by lamplight. He looked up when she knocked, gestured for her to come in. Cannot decide? He asked, reading her face. How can I? She said, sitting down without being invited. If I stay, I am abandoning Germany. If I go, I am abandoning myself. Either choice feels like betrayal. Dr. Cole set down his pen. Let me tell you something, Nurse Weber. I have worked with hundreds of nurses in my career. Army nurses, civilian nurses, volunteers, professionals. You are among the best. Not good for a German, not good for a prisoner, just good. Period. If you go back to Germany, you will find work. Your skills are valuable anywhere. But if you stay here, you can build something. You can teach. You can advance. You can be part of rebuilding medical care for a generation of wounded soldiers. That matters. That is meaningful work. But my family... Your family would want you to be happy, to be safe, to have a future. Germany right now offers none of those things. I am not telling you what to decide, but I am telling you that if you choose to stay, it is not betrayal. It is survival. And there is no shame in choosing to survive. Other German prisoners heard about the offer. Some were angry. You would abandon Germany? Abandon your families? Others were envious. You have a chance to escape the ruins. Take it. In the end, Elsa decided to return to Germany. She had aging parents in Bremen. She did not know if they were alive, but she had to find out. I must go back, she said, crying as she hugged Greta and Margarete. I must try to find them, but you two, you should stay. You have no one waiting. Stay and build something new. Margarete decided to stay. I have nothing in Hamburg. My family is gone. My hospital is rubble. Here I can heal. That is all I want. To heal. Greta struggled longest. She thought about her sister in Munich, about her mother who had died during the war, about the city where she had grown up. But she also thought about the hospital, about the patients who trusted her, about Dr. Cole's respect, about being valued for her skills rather than judged for her nationality. In the end, she wrote to her sister. A long letter explaining everything. The hospital, the surgeries, the offer, the impossible choice. She did not know if her sister would understand, but she had to try. And then she told Colonel Roberts she would stay. Greta Weber became Greta Weber Morrison. She married Lieutenant Thomas Morrison, the young officer whose life she had saved in that solo surgery. It was a scandal at first, a German prisoner marrying an American officer. Some people never accepted it, but Thomas did not care and neither did Greta. They had 2 daughters. She worked at Camp Swift's hospital for 3 years, then moved with Thomas to San Antonio, where she worked at Brooke Army Medical Center for another 20 years. She trained countless nurses, always emphasizing competence over everything else. Your skills are your identity, she would tell them. Not your nationality, not your religion, not your politics. What you can do, how well you can do it, that is what matters. That is what will save lives. She pioneered several surgical techniques, publishing papers in medical journals, speaking at conferences. She became one of the most respected surgical nurses in Texas. When people asked about her accent, about her background, she told the truth. She never hid who she was or where she came from. She was proud of surviving, proud of choosing healing over hatred. Her daughters grew up knowing their mother's story. They understood that she had been a German prisoner who chose to stay in America, who married an American officer, who built a life out of the ruins of war. They were proud of her, though they understood that some people would always judge her for her choices. Margarete Klein stayed at Camp Swift until it closed in 1947, then moved to Houston. She opened a private practice specializing in burn treatment. She helped hundreds of patients, military and civilian. She never married, never returned to Germany. She said once in an interview late in life, "I found my home in healing. Geography was never the point." Elsa Hoffman returned to Germany and found her parents alive, barely in the ruins of Bremen. She worked as a nurse there for 40 years, helping rebuild the city's medical system. She and Greta exchanged letters for decades until Elsa's death in 1986. In 1985, Greta was invited to speak at a medical conference about her experiences. She was 70 years old, still working part-time, still teaching. She told the story of Camp Swift, of being a German prisoner asked to lead surgery on American soldiers. The audience listened in silence. At the end, someone asked her, "Do you ever regret staying in America?" Greta thought for a long moment. "I regret that circumstances forced me to choose. I regret the war that made such choices necessary. But staying? No, I do not regret that. In Germany, I was a nurse who served the Wehrmacht. In America, I became a nurse who served humanity. That is what I was always meant to be." And so the scalpel became more than a surgical tool. It became a symbol of trust across enemy lines, of respect earned through competence, of humanity surviving war. For those 3 German nurses, the chance to lead surgery on American soldiers became proof that professional skill transcends nationality, that healing is stronger than hatred, that sometimes the enemy can see your value more clearly than your own side ever did. They expected humiliation and rejection. Instead, they found respect and purpose. They expected to be judged for their nationality. Instead, they were judged for their skill. They expected captivity to be punishment. Instead, it became the opportunity to be what they had always wanted to be. Nurses who healed regardless of politics or flags or the bitter divisions of war. As Greta told her grandchildren years later, "The hardest thing about that time was not the work, or the fear, or being a prisoner. The hardest thing was accepting that the enemy valued us more than our own nation had." That taught me something important. Loyalty to your skills, to your profession, to the work of healing, that is more fundamental than loyalty to any flag. Because when you save a life, you do not save a nationality, you save a person. And that is the only thing that matters. The story of the German POW nurses at Camp Swift is not widely known. It is a footnote in the massive history of World War II. But it represents something important, the possibility of respect and humanity even in circumstances defined by conflict. It reminds us that professional excellence can build bridges where politics builds walls. It shows us that the work of healing connects us in ways that war cannot sever. And that is a story worth remembering. If this story moved you, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. These forgotten moments of history, these small acts of trust and respect across enemy lines, deserve to be shared. They remind us that even in the darkest times, humanity can surprise us. Even in war, there is room for recognition, for respect, for the simple truth that a skilled hand and a compassionate heart have no nationality. Thank you for watching. Until next time, remember these stories. Share them. Let them remind you that we are all, in the end, just human.